What's going on YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. I do hope you guys are well. In today's video, I want to address a question that I've been getting quite a lot as I've been playing a lot of DDO and uploading some DDO videos on this channel. Don't worry, I am still playing Lord of the Rings Online, but that question is, what are the differences? That both games are produced by Standing Stone Games, so what are the major differences? They're both technically titled MMORPGs, and as someone that has now played both, somewhat extensively over the other one, I kind of just want to give you guys a bit of context, relay my feedback from the last, month or so of playing DDO, and of course my many months of playing Lotro. So if you enjoy this sort of content, please do consider leaving a like rating and subscribing for more Lord of the Rings Online and more Dungeons and Dragons Online too. I guess the best place to start when we talk about the differences is of course two major factors, one on Lord of the Rings Online side and one on DDO. Starting with Lotro, of course the major difference, and I guess one of the major reasons that you might sway to one over the other, is how much do you enjoy Middle-earth? How much do you enjoy Tolkien's workings? Because if you are a massive Tolkien fan, then of course you're going to spend a lot of time in this game. For DDO's sake, how much time have you spent playing the pen and paper tabletop version? How much time have you spent playing the online version of Dungeons and Dragons Online, which confusingly isn't Dungeons and Dragons Online, but that will influence perhaps your segue into DDO. Now right off the bat, which is why I kind of wanted to sit here in Micheldelvin, or stand here in Micheldelvin, is because I wanted to just showcase how well Lord of the Rings Online does its world building. And this is our first topic, realistically, is, if I'm being completely blunt, and this is going to be a no bullshit, just straight up, the difference is how I honestly feel between the two. Lord of the Rings Online does world building so much better, but in a very, very different way. So Lord of the Rings Online is very seamless where it can be. You could pretty much, if you wanted to jump on your horse and just ride north until your heart's content, you can do that. You'll basically hit very little barriers whatsoever in terms of loading screens. You are free to roam wherever you want to. You are fully in control to explore the world building and just take the world at your own pace, at your own say-so. DDO, on the other hand, is very instant. It's very instant focused. Things happen a lot more quicker. It's a lot more sort of action focused. In terms of traversing the world of DDO, now let's not get this twisted. The world of DDO is amazing. If you're into high fantasy medieval, then DDO is a fantastic game. It doesn't have quite as much open world progression and traversal, but there are still elements out there. You've still got these kind of open world zones which connect you to other instances that you can traverse via mount or via foot. It doesn't leave you without the sense of exploration, so don't worry there. Dungeons and Dragons Online really does lean into the jumping in and out of content fairly quickly, whereas Lord of the Rings Online, you would traverse a good 10, 15, 20 minutes to complete a quest, ride back to that NPC, take another quest from that NPC, go to the same spot just a little bit further, and then rinse and repeat, and take in the environment around you, because obviously that's what it's here for. DDO takes that out of the equation. You take a quest, you go into a dungeon which is typically located behind the NPC or not too far away. You are told a really, really intricately woven, well-narrated story when you're in the instance, and that is updated like through the further and deeper you go into that instance, and that is a real treat in itself. I can't lie. I enjoy the questing in Lotro. I enjoy seeing the sights, but the questing in DDO, the moment-to-moment storytelling gameplay, is fantastic, and it really, really does lean into that. It's quick, it's snappy. It's ideal if you're the sort of person that you've not got like a massive amount of time on your hands. You just want to jump into a few raids, get some progression going, then DDO is probably the game that you would lean towards. For full clarity, I have been playing Dungeons and Dragons Online and Lotro, mainly single player, apart from maybe doing Rift and some raids and that in Lotro, but both of these games are treated as a single player RPG and they hold up very well. If I'm being completely honest, Dungeons and Dragons Online holds up better in its single player storytelling just because of the DM narration. That really does add such a chef's kiss to the experience. Like, for example, if you enter a serious instance or something that is notable or progressive in Lotro or the start of a raid, you'll get the narration, typically like I can only imagine Gandalf voicing over like the loading screens and so on and so forth. You know, you get that narration, but with DDO, it's there all the time. Something significant happens in a dungeon, you know, it's there. It's what really strikes you in DDO is the setting. It doesn't just describe to you what's going on within the dungeon, but the setting. You know, it's like you walk into a gloomy room filled with decaying flesh and, you know, all this sort of stuff that really kind of works your senses about working your senses. So I really, really love that for DDO, and it really leans into that. Kicking it back over to Lord of the Rings Online, though, let's not get this twisted at all. We spoke about the world building slightly, but one thing I absolutely love, and I think a lot of people will love about this game, is it allows you to adventure to places that you've read in the book or places that you've seen in the movie whilst you're questing, and you get to interact with the characters, you know, and see all these different locations at your own pace, and you can take your time and you can really, really soak it in. I do feel like Lord of the Rings Online is the more slower paced game. I definitely feel like that's okay to say, but it really, again, leans into that. That's such a strong positive for Lotro. Like, for example, if Lotro tried to be more like DDO and be more instance focused, you would lose so much magic about the world. You'd lose, you know, walking into the Shire for the first time, or entering the doors of Durin into Moria, you know, even traversing the hills of Rivendell and winding all the way down. Being able to see, touch and feel things in Lotro is absolutely its forte. It's, yeah, absolutely second to none. Outside of the world, when we talk about character creation, customization, that sort of thing, I've got to be completely frank with you guys. DDO absolutely smashes it out of the water. In terms of general build crafting, not just in terms of what races are available, which there are quite a few races in DDO, but in terms of being able to craft a build that is tailored to you, your wants, your needs, your fantasy, the list of options are nigh on endless, if I'm being completely honest. Even some of the most ridiculous builds that you think wouldn't make sense are just available to you. They might not be very good, but you can do it if you want to. What's up, dudes? Post-edit Josh here. If you've got this far in the video, thank you very much for sticking with me. And thank you to all of you that have supported me on Patreon and via YouTube membership. You guys really do help keep the dream alive. If you want to gain access to some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, post-edit stuff, community bits, then I'll leave all the links down below. Patreon you can support from just £1, and YouTube membership I think is around £3 to £4. But it's not expected, but for those of you that do support, I appreciate you so much. Enjoy the rest of the video. Lotro, of course, has its own skill trees, as you know, as we can see. You've got typically, you know, 3 that you can go down. And whilst you've got multiple points that you can spend between this and virtues, it is a fairly linear progression. I think that's fair to say. You've got certain elements of your character that you can customize, but it's not quite as flexible as DDO. And whilst you're leveling up in Dungeons and Dragons Online, you can get to a certain point where you can reincarnate your character. So you basically cut all of your progress back to level 1 for a gain of power, and you can keep doing this. I believe you can do this, you know, quite a handful of times actually, and that will then basically put you in good stead for the higher tier raid. So whilst you're grinding gear, there is also a grind for stats on your character to kind of just keep things fresh. And the leveling process in DDO, at least what I've experienced now, approaching level 13 now, it feels a lot faster than Lotro, because you've got 2 options with DDO. You can split your leveling into ranks. So for every 5 ranks, you gain 1 level, or you can switch your XP bar to just see the level all the way out. So rather than see that instant gratification at, you know, rank 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5, which is your level up, you can just see it all the way through. And depending on who you are, it can really just keep your brain ticking, you know, keep sort of chasing those smaller incremental gains rather than looking at the bigger picture. A wise man once said, with great power comes great responsibility, and this really is the case with DDO, because as fantastic as the character customization is, the build intricacy is, things are so difficult to understand. really difficult to understand if you've not played tabletop D&D. I feel like in some instances, to understand the terminology and the descriptions fully, you basically either have to trawl through the wiki, which takes you out of the experience a little bit, or you have to have played some sort of pen and paper or online pen and paper version. Some bits are really simple. There's, you know, common terminology that's taken from many games, but there's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons specific talk that will just confuse you. I do feel like Lord of the Rings Online, for the most part, apart from maybe like health being morale and little things like that, quirky changes. But for the most part, it translates really well. It's really, really easy to get into. You know, the stats on most of the items, you can kind of work out what they do. I just feel like for a new player, it's a bit more of a seamless sort of like non-thinking experience to get into. Now, as we move on to the socialization of both games, I have to fully admit, I'm not at endgame in DDO. I've never hit level cap. I don't know what the full social aspect personally would be in DDO, but I have seen multiple streams, spoke to streamers, spoke to content creators, and a lot of them tend to typically get together for like raid nights and just run like raid content. I don't know if there's any like social player housing or anything like that. I did join a guild, and I joined a guild quite early on. Everyone was really nice, people were chatting, but because of the level differences between characters, so basically the way it works in DDO is if you are, I think it's like 3 or 4 levels higher than the lowest person in the raid, that person that's lower than you will either get reduced XP or get no XP. So basically, from where I'm experiencing, might just be my experience, but for where I'm sitting, not many people tend to be available in a level range to run content with each other. Whereas in Lotro, people just tend to just run whatever with each other, just because, you know, either they need something, need a bit of gear from it or something, or they just enjoy it. I'm sure people in DDO are happy to help new people, but if it was me personally and I was like leveling, I would just kind of be like, well, I'm not going to get anything from this, and neither are you. I feel like it was a bit of a detriment. In Lord of the Rings Online, you can also run multiple versions of the same quest to, from what I can understand, no detriment whatsoever. You can just grind a set piece of gear if you want it, grind it for drops, whereas in DDO, if you keep doing the same quest over and over again, you get what's classed as a ransack, like a debuff. So basically you get like, I believe it's not just reduced XP, but it's also reduced drop rates as well. So it kind of penalizes you for running the same quest over and over again, which is just quite interesting. Never bothered me, you know, never bothered me, but I thought it was quite interesting. So yeah, outside of socializing in dungeons and running that sort of content, I must say that with the player housing in Lotro, the bird watching, the community events and the community performances, I do think Lotro really does have the edge on the social side of things. I just think not only that, the player base, to my understanding, is bigger as well. So it's a bit more established, but DDO feels a bit more niche in that sense. I'm sure socializing in DDO is fantastic. In Lotro, it just seems to have the edge from what I've experienced. The actual instance content that we were just referring to there is very different between both games. Like, it's almost not even comparable. DDO really does lean into the dungeon crawling, raiding, that sort of thing. You're not just running from point A to point B and just killing enemies. There are quests out there that you can do that, but a lot of the quests will have intricate traps, puzzles, keys you need to collect. Like, you really do feel like you need other classes to kind of complement yours. You need maybe a rogue to disable traps and unlock locks. You need certain classes that have got a decent level of search skill, so you can unlock hidden doors to get through certain areas a bit easier. You need healers, you need clerics, whereas, you know, in Lotro, there is the typical trinity. There's, you know, tanks, healers, DPS, but for majority of like content, you know, as you start to scale a little bit higher than it, it doesn't really matter. Whereas depending on which difficulty you select in DDO, some of the traps can kill you just so quickly. And a lot of your time is spent kind of maneuvering. You know, you spend more time worrying about the traps than you do the enemies as well sometimes. But yeah, that was just a little observation. Saying that though, Lotro has some fantastic content. I've experienced a small portion of it, but Rift, again, is probably one of the more notable ones. Running Rift with a full party or even just 6 of you is fantastic. I do feel like Lotro leans more towards the traditional dungeon crawling MMO experience. There are, you know, the odd puzzles here and there, especially I believe it's in the Lowlands. You've got there's a tavern there that you can do a puzzle sort of quest through. But most of it is your sort of traditional pull mobs, burn them down, kill boss, move on sort of thing. Getting towards the end of the video, if we talk about the story, obviously story for me, I'd have to be biased here. And I guess it's not even biased, it's just obvious, but the story of Lord of the Rings Online, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien's work is, of course, a masterpiece. It is, you know, Middle-earth is, yeah, quite possibly the best fantasy world to ever be created. So I'm not sorry in saying that. Existing and coexisting in Middle-earth alongside other people and getting to know the story alongside the Fellowship, following the epic book quest is always something that will be a treat to me, and I'll always thoroughly enjoy no matter how many times I do it. With DDO, I'm sure there is an overarching story. Maybe I have to, play the pen and paper tabletop game to understand it a bit more, but from what I can work out is that each instance and each quest has an overarching narrative relating to that quest, and it's told through the dungeon itself with the narration of the DM. I don't know if I just missed the overall story, but it definitely didn't seem to click as well as Lord of the Rings Online. But then saying that, I kind of knew the story before I went into Lotro, so I might be off the mark there. But me personally, of course, I'm always going to gravitate towards Lotro. In terms of the more miscellaneous benefits that you might be looking for between both games, from what I could see within DDO, there is an element of crafting. A lot of people do it. By the looks of it, it's not required. There are plenty of people that I've been watching, streamers, content creators, that just have never touched craft and never been interested, but it is definitely there, and I'm sure it's a robust system. I know crafting in Lotro is really held in high regard. A lot of people do it. A lot of people prefer crafting to just generally day-to-day questing. So those two things are there if you want them. Mounts, pets, cosmetics, it's all there depending on what you want, and it is quite literally with Lotro and DDO. It's chalk and cheese. If you want more grounded fantasy in terms of your cosmetics, your armor, your pets, your mounts, Lotro is where you'll need to be. DDO is, of course, very Dungeons and Dragons. There are a lot of dragons. There's owlbears, there's kobolds, there's flying carpets, there's like all sorts of crazy armor. And yeah, I really enjoy high fantasy and, of course, grounded fantasy. So both games really just appeal to me. Within both games, there are many years of expansions. Of course, a lot of them are free. Some of them that have obviously come out, a lot of the content's quest packs. The content in Lotro, of course, you've got an abundance of content there. But of course, there is a lot of paid stuff as well. With DDO, a lot of the content is accessed via quest packs. Now, many quest packs you'll get if you subscribe via VIP. There are a couple of coupon codes that come out every now and again, which you get access to a lot of content as well, or you can straight up buy expansions, which in truth is not really that much different to Lord of the Rings Online. The expansions, in my opinion, I don't mind saying this, and a lot of these stuff on the stores, they are quite pricey, but you got to bear in mind these games are older. They are inherently free to play if you wanted to, and people need to earn a living. So if you're enjoying them, you enjoy existing around that sort of ecosystem, then unfortunately you need to pay. It's just how the world works. I guess to summarize, whether I can recommend one or the other is a really hard question, because if they were both exactly the same, then I guess it would be which one do I prefer? But they are just two totally different games. They really are. Like, if it was me personally and I wanted to play something that was a bit more, clicky, a bit more action-packed, a bit more fast-paced, I would just gravitate towards DDO. I definitely prefer the combat, if I'm honest. We didn't really touch on the combat too much. Lotro is more tab target. You typically just auto attack, press a few buttons, enemy attacks you, you attack them. Whereas the combat in DDO is very physics based. You can jump over arrows, you can dodge spells, you can roll out of the way. It feels a lot more responsive than Lotro does. But yeah, if I wanted something that was a bit more clicky, a bit more moment to moment, definitely DDO. But if I just want to relax, I've got hours to kill, I just want to quest in Middle-earth, in one of my favourite places to be, then Lord of the Rings Online is for me. So yeah, if you want something that you can just blast through, enjoy some moment-to-moment gameplay, moment-to-moment stories, DDO is probably the game for you. If you want to relax a little bit, take it all in, enjoy the lore, then Lotro is also for you. Or you could just do what I'm doing and play both for very different reasons. They are both incredibly great games. So yeah, thank you if you got this far in the video. I know it's been a bit rambling, a bit waffly if you like, but hopefully it's kind of got the point across, and it will stop some of you guys asking me the same question over and over again. Yeah, good news is we are still making Lord of the Rings Online content. I did promise you guys that is not going anywhere, but we're also making DDO content as well. I enjoy those games a lot. So as always, if you enjoyed this video, please do consider leaving a like rating, subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys in the next one.